Hello and welcome to Tienery Co. My name is of course Luke, also known as Tienery, and I'm going to be showing you StoryDev 2, or technically, more specifically, the StoryDev editor. So I'm going to be demoing a part of this editor today. So what I'm going to start with is show you this GitHub repository that has been up for quite a while now. As you can see, it's been around for 2 years. And what I've done over the last couple of years is create a language that is simple and easy to use to create interactive stories. So the idea behind this project originally, and technically still is to abstract storytelling and story writing from logic. Now, I'm going to be comparing a lot of things to RDC Draft because this is very similar to RDC Draft in certain respects, and obviously there is many differences as well. So we're going to be taking a look at this project and how it all works. Now, this parser, I think what would be best is to show you this. So this is the editor that I've been working on over the past couple of days. I've got this recent folders thing here. I'm not going to click on this right now. Now, I'm going to demo this to show you basically currently what features exist within the editor at the moment, and then we're going to actually do a bit of coding. Now, some of you may be wondering whether this is going to be free and open source or something like that. It's not going to be free, it's actually going to remain closed source for the time being, and it's not going to be released until obviously most of the features that I want implemented is actually in the editor. Now, first of all, I'm going to show you how you basically use StoryDev editor, at least in its current state. So what I've done is I've pressed Ctrl O. That allows me to open a folder and I can start typing in the path. This will let me navigate around my file system in a variety of different ways. Right, I can go to Story, Age of Atlantis Story, and as you can also see, I'm actually pressing Tab, which completes the first item in the list. So if I just go back a minute, so if you see here or here, right, so as I type, it filters down to whatever the folder name or file name is, and then if I type in T once again, it filters down to only one. I can press Tab. If there's only one item in the list, then you can just press Tab and it will complete on the first item, i.e. the item at the top. Then you press slash again, Tab, slash, and then when I press Enter, it's going to parse a load of files. So in this instance, it's parsed 16 files, and down here I've also got the directory that I'm looking at. So once I've done that, what I can then do is start actually loading some files. So I can press Ctrl L and I can start going through to these files. Let's go to something simple, shall we? So let's go to intro 2. So this is some what I call dialog blocks. So think of each file as a conversation, right? So each file is a conversation, and within a scene perhaps, and within that conversation you have multiple dialog blocks. So you might have certain choices within a dialog block that goes to other dialog blocks, right? So let's go to the true beginning. So this is a very simple file. At the top is some narrative, so scene shakes. You can think of narrative as sort of scene direction instead of actual text that displays on the screen. So it would help the developers who are going to look at this text and think, okay, what is going to happen at certain points in this story. So scene shakes, what that's going to tell the developer is, okay, we need to shake the scene a bit. Sanya then says what's going on. Another character emerges, Jahaya, and as you can also see, these characters have different color highlights. Inside the files that I'll show in a minute, you can define your characters, and that followed by a color in hexadecimal. And then Jahaya emerges, and obviously you have a bit of a discussion. Cultists smash through windows, blah blah blah, right? Then you get to the bottom, and you've got two choices. Now, in this instance, one of these leads to a conversation, and another one is a script. Now, StoryDev has no concept of scripting. That's not the idea. The idea is to make sure that the writers of your video game pretty much can just focus on the writing and not much of the logic, right? So they're the ones that say, okay, this is what's happening in the scene, and then the developers can take a look at it and think, okay, this is what I need to do, right? This is how I need to lay out the logic of the scene, so to speak. So what we've got here is two choices. We've got defend them, which is end. These are clickable, but if I click on this, it comes up with an error message. Let's just click that again. The block title end could not be found within the current conversation, right? So it comes up for a short period of time. Maybe it needs to be a bit longer. And there's another option that says try to converse out. This is actually another dialog block, so if I click on it, it will actually go to that block. Now this is quite counterintuitive at the moment, because there's no real way to know where this came from, right? If you see, it's just another discussion. Now I can press escape and it will take me back here, but if we click on converse, right, we have no way to know from this screen where it came from. We know based on what we just did by clicking on the true beginning that it came from here, right? It came from this dialogue here, this dialog block, the true beginning. But if we're inside this and we assume we know nothing about this story, and we take a look at this, we have no way to know where it came from. So it's a bit counterintuitive, and we'll start actually putting some mechanisms in after this demo as to how we want to go about doing that. But we've got some information here, and this is actually going to be part of a game that I'm making. Now, I did actually try RGC Draft because I wanted to obviously find a piece of software that lets me build and have a visual representation of the story that I want to make, because the story is getting increasingly more complicated. And as we go up here to something like, say, the second ritual room, for example, I'm not going to click on too much of these because I don't want to give any of the story away. But you can see this is, you can sort of imagine this. So there's some choices in here that say, okay, decide to trap a cultist, decide to assassinate a cultist, or think of something else, right? And then when you click on one of these, right, decide to trap a cultist, decide to assassinate a cultist, right? That then this links to this links to this, but there's no way to know how that works unless there's some lines drawing to it, right? So we need to be able to move these about and be able to know what's going on, right? Because someone else looking at this, I know this links to this because I wrote the story, But if someone else comes along, like another developer, and they're looking at this and they're thinking, hang on a minute, what's going on here? They don't know what's going on. So obviously there needs to be quite a lot of work still needs to be done within this editor, right? And then if we go up to something like Trap the Cultist, for example, suddenly we've got loads and loads of stuff, and we're just like, what the bloody hell is going on, right? So it can get quite complicated very quickly. So naturally, I wanted to obviously start doing something that was a bit more visual, that made it easier for myself to take a look at the story in a visual way that makes it easy for me to figure out what's going on. So I did try Artsy Draft, and I wasn't overly keen on it, primarily because the way that you have to integrate the pipeline is overly complex, and it doesn't give you much in terms of tutorials on how to get started, and that's a very big problem. All it does, it really gives you is an API reference, and that's about it, and it just assumes you know what you're doing, which is not ideal, really, to be honest. So I've decided against using Artsy Draft for that reason. I might as well just create my own in-house tool for the time being, and obviously I will be releasing it at some point. So yeah, that's pretty much it. This is what it looks like, right? Go away. This is what it looks like. So you've got Trap the Cultist. Now, I want to get rid of this hash at some point. I've changed the syntax slightly, so technically this is convo, not hash. It's backward compatible, but at some point that syntax is going to get deprecated to make it more obvious. This is a convo block, right? So that's that. I'm just going to keep it like that for the time being. So this is what it looks like. This is choices, and that's that syntax. So you can automatically know, go away. You can automatically know what's going on here. You can that obviously indicates narrative, right? This indicates an option. This doesn't get shown inside of the editor. So if I click on questions for cultist, it doesn't actually show you that option exclusive. What that option does is, if you implement it correctly in your game, then what you can do is you can go back to this dialog block, and if you click on, say, this, for example, and then you go back to questions for cultist, what you previously clicked on will no longer exist. That's the idea for the exclusive for this exclusive option. And then obviously you've got loads of other things here as well. And obviously the main idea behind this is to make it extremely easy for someone who wants a very simple and easy solution to build an interactive story without having to go through cumbersome steps, which is why I decided to make this editor instead of using Artsy Draft, because Artsy Draft, I mean, it seems easy to use and very intuitive. Problem that I find with the editor is that the way that it offers the options to export, it offers options for Unity and Unreal, but I don't use any of those things. I'd rather build my own game, right, using my own language, using Hakes and Car, and there's no easy way for me to export into a format like this so that I can use it for my game, right? So that's why I built StoryDev 2, as I mentioned earlier. And the great thing about this is that the syntax is so simple that even if you don't want to use Hakes, you can develop your own parser and implement your own rendering really simply. And another thing that I'd like to show you is just how simple it really is. So if I go, I mean, all of this uses the StoryDev 2 editor, right? And the way that it all renders is really quite simple. So if I go back here, this is some overlay, by the way. I haven't implemented multi-line text yet. That is something that does need to be doing, but that'll be done at some point in the future. But point being, so I'm going to close this down. And the way that it's rendered is really quite simple. So if I go down to where is it? Parse all convos in folder. So what this is doing is I want to get all of the files in that folder. So when we open this again, right, and when it finally loads, so when I open this, we've got this folder here. When I click on that, this is called, and we get all the files in that folder with the extension .sdc, because that's the file extension for StoryDev conversation, if you can imagine, right? And then you just parse them accordingly. And then you can get the characters, so everything that's defined as a character, you can get those characters. You can get the character information, so the data. The first part of the array is the character name, and the second part of the array is the color, if obviously one exists. If we then go back up here, we can then start rendering it. And it's really, really simple. It's just a case of getting all of the commands inside of a selected block, right? So this selected block, we imagine the selected block is a conversation that's currently happening, right? So that's if I load up something else again, for example, so all of these are the blocks, right? These blocks here. So we get a selected block. This is a inside function so that we can get it's just a useful utility just to get the character color if the character name exists. If not, just make it black, right? And then we iterate over the commands, and each command is basically one of these. So Jahia, we have arrived, that's a command. Let's look at something else. Jahia, Sanya and Caroline enter, that's a command. You don't have to render it, but I render it in this here to obviously make it obvious it's narrative. This here, yes to tour, go on tour, skip tour, that's also a command. It's all part of the same command. And if we go back here, we've got choices, and each choice is part of cmd.data, and each data has this semicolon, and to the left of the semicolon is the display, and to the right of the semicolon is the instruction, whether what to go to or which dialog block to go to, etc, etc, etc. So it's really, really simple and really easy to just get something on the screen, and it doesn't take much work, right? It really doesn't take much work. So it's a lot easier and a lot simpler already versus RTC Draft. And I've only been developing this for a couple of days. So that just basically proves that you don't need to do much with StoryDev 2, the parser side of things, to actually get stuff done. Now, obviously, this editor still needs a lot of work, as I mentioned. So let's finish this demo off, and I'm going to actually go into the next editor, which will be in my next video. So I will see you in a bit.